What's up? What's up, man? Saturday. We like more than halfway through the year. Special shout out to my boy, Reginald Hope. It's his birthday today, or it was the 15th, but it's my brother. He's the one I'm always reposting his reels, photographer and whatnot. So if you're in the DFW area, hit him up. The man's a true professional. He did our homeboy's wedding. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna talk about disease today. And yeah, we're gonna talk about disease. Now, here's the thing about disease. You know, Dr. Sebi has said that all diseases are the same. He said all diseases are inflammation or mucus, and that's just not true. That's just, you know, that's some of it, but he didn't word it correctly. But you know, the thing is, you gotta think, when you're sick, what is a common symptom in every disease or every illness or every ailment? You don't have any energy, right? You're tired, you're sleepy, you're cranky, you know all that. You're in pain somehow. So, you know, I wanted to share an article right quick, but I wanted to break it down, what's going on, you know, just basic energy production. So when we eat, right, we eat carbon-based food, and we'll just say carbohydrates. All right, so a carbohydrate is a hydrated carbon. It's a hydrated carbon. So only CH2O. That's a carbohydrate, CH2O, right? We don't need to know that, so we just say sugar. We just call it sugar or glucose. Sugar and glucose is a 6-carbon compound. 6 carbons, right? So we got 6 carbons. And when you eat, the food goes into your cells. Food goes into the cells and it breaks down into energy. So it happens in a couple of steps, right? Now, follow me now. Just follow me. You know, this may seem a little cumbersome, but I'm gonna try to make it easy so you can understand. So, and it'd be better if I can go on my whiteboard, but I don't have a microphone and a lens that can reach that far. So when you eat carbohydrates, it's 6 carbon glucose, and it breaks down into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate. Or pyruvic acid. And then once you get that pyruvate, it breaks down further, and it actually breaks down into electricity. It produces an electric current within the cell, right? So that's when oxygen is present. So there's 2 compartments in the cell. So you have, I don't know if y'all can see this right here, right? Okay, so see this big stuff right here? That's called it's like the cell water. It's called the cytoplasm. And this little part right here, this is where the energy production happens right here. But it first starts in the water right here, called the cytoplasm. So within the cytoplasm, that's where it breaks down into pyruvate, a 3-carbon compound. So you got 6 carbons and you go to 3 carbons. And then, you know, that happens in the cell water. So when there's oxygen present, this pyruvate, this 3-carbon compound, is gonna go into this compartment in the cell right here. And that's where it's gonna further break down and produce an electric current. You know, so there's electricity is happening in your body. Okay, so this little compartment right here is something called a mitochondria, right? And if you take in freshman biology, they all say what's the powerhouse of the cell and all that stuff like that. So that's where things get totally broken down within the mitochondria. That's where energy is produced. That's where all of your energy is, well, not all, but I would say 98% of the energy is produced in this little compartment right here. All right, so out of this compartment comes carbon dioxide, CO2. I don't know if you can see that, it says CO2. And that's what we breathe out, right? So all that happens when there's oxygen present. Now, when there's oxygen not present, right? There has to be oxygen present for this to work right here. If there's no oxygen present or you consumed all the oxygen, then this compound right here, this pyruvate, cannot be broken down into carbon dioxide. So instead, it's going to convert into something called lactic acid. Okay, it's going to produce lactic acid, and you know that happens when there's no oxygen present. Now there was a, I think he was an Austrian physicist, or he was a biochemist, but you know he's like the premier biochemist of the 20th century. His name was Otto Warburg, and the guy he discovered a process in which instead of the pyruvate breaking down into carbon dioxide in the mitochondria, it will just convert to lactic acid or lactate at a high pace, at a high rate, even when oxygen is present. Okay, and this is called the Warburg effect. It's something called aerobic glycolysis. You know, and it's to where that the sugar, the 3-carbon sugar, will not get broken down furthermore, you know, because there's no oxygen, or now there is oxygen present in this case, but you know something's going on. So what he said is there's some kind of defect within the cell that won't allow it to be broken down anymore, and this is the genesis of cancer. So when you have oxygen present, but the molecule won't be further broken down, instead it turns to lactic acid, that's the genesis of cancer. And I wouldn't even say that's just the genesis of cancer. That's the genesis of any kind of sickness. Okay? So what did I say happens in the compartment where the energy is produced, right? So if there's no components in the energy producing part of the cell, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a lack of energy, and that's pretty much what happens in any kind of disease. And you know that's basically, you know, cancer is like the last phase of that whole process and whatnot. Okay, so lactic acid, it's a factor, or not a factor, but it's actually, man, what is the word? What is the word I can use? It's an indicator. Yeah, it's an indicator in every disease. Every disease there is, lactic acid is, that you got a high concentration of lactic acid within the cell, okay? So, carbon dioxide good, lactic acid bad. When you're producing carbon dioxide, that means you're getting the full turnover of energy of the food you eat. If you're producing lactic acid, then that means you're not getting the energy that you need. That means the energy production is shut down somehow. Okay, and you know, another way you can remember it is when you're working out. You know, when you're working out really hard, you're lifting weights, and you get tired, and your muscles start burning. That's lactic acid. You know why? Because you consumed all the oxygen. Your muscles have no oxygen available. So it converts the energy that is being fed, and converts it into lactic acid. And that's why your muscles are sore, they burn, sometimes when you're working out. So I was going to read this article by Dr. Ray Peat. Again, the man was a genius. He was a true scientist, and we really lost a great one. He was 86 years old, but I mean, the man was as sharp as a tack. So this is mitochondrial mortality. So it says that the main idea is lactic acid and carbon dioxide have opposing effects. Intense exercise damages cells in ways that cumulatively impair metabolism. There's clear evidence that glycolysis, producing lactic acid from glucose, has toxic effects. There we go. Suppressing respiration and killing cells. Within 5 minutes, exercise lowers the activity of enzymes that oxidize glucose. Listen to this. Diabetes, Alzheimer's, and general aging involve increased lactic acid production and accumulated metabolic or mitochondrial damage. Okay, so again, that part of the cell that produces energy, if it's damaged, you're cooked. Okay, you're cooked because you're not gonna have any energy. You're gonna be tired. You're gonna start breaking down your tissues, and it's just bad. All right, production of glycolysis, lactic acid, and pyruvic acid suppress oxidation of glucose. So what that means is the complete combustion of glucose. All right. So since reading Warburg's publications in the late 1960s and early 70s and doing my own research on tissue respiration, I've concluded that Warburg was on the right track in seeing mitochondrial respiration as the controlling influence in cell differentiation. So what that means, what cell differentiation is if you have uncontrolled cell differentiation, that's cancer. You have a tumor growing, or you have some kind of, basically it's tissue trying to replace the damaged tissue. It's your body trying to replace the damaged tissue that was just poisoned or whatnot. All right. So I'm gonna read that again. I've been convinced that Warburg was on the right track in seeing the mitochondrial respiration as a controlling influence in cell differentiation, and in seeing cancer as a reversion. Look at this, as a reversion to a primitive form of life based on a respiratory defect. Okay. Harry Rubin's study of cells and culture have expanded Warburg's principle in the process of cancerization, showing that genetic change. Listen to this. Listen to this. Genetic changes occur only after the cell has been transformed into cancer. So what is that saying? That's saying that cancer is not genetic. Okay, like it's silly to think that we have cancer genes. Like that's crazy. The whole purpose of this machine, on a micro level, is to keep this machine going. And you got to get that in your head, because it's so pertinent on all levels of just our lives. If a machine or a system cannot sustain itself, guess what's going to happen? It's going to collapse. It's going to die. Okay? It is now well recognized that defective mitochondrial respiration. Listen to this. Okay, I haven't even really just read it. I skimmed over it, but it said it is now well recognized that defective mitochondrial respiration is the central factor in diseases of muscles, brain, liver, kidneys, and other organs. The common view has been that mitochondrial defects are produced by genetic defects that are either inherited or required or irreversible. So that was the common view. I'm gonna read that again. The common view has been that mitochondrial defects are produced by genetic defects that are either inherited or required and are irreversible. Mitochondria depend on some genes, and then you don't need to know all that. It said, but they also contain some genes and mutations in specific mitochondria. You don't need to know all that. Okay, check this out. Because remember, one time I said that structure and function are interrelated. Everything in your body is placed where it needs to be for a certain purpose. And we need to understand this when we're doing things in our life. We need to place things in strategic positions for a certain purpose. Warburg believed that mitochondria supported specialized cell functions by concentrating themselves in the places where energy is needed. So remember what I said about the mitochondria, it's where energy is produced. This idea has some interesting implications. For example, okay, listen to this. When the amount of thyroid hormone is increased, or when an organism adapts to high altitude, the number of mitochondria increases. But in energy deficient states, such as diabetes, they don't. Okay? How are these crucial organelles called into existence by the hormone that increases respiration and energy, and also by hypoxic conditions of high altitudes? In both of these conditions, the availability of oxygen is limiting the ability to produce energy. Okay, so you need oxygen to produce energy, and that's exactly what I said before. If the oxygen is not there, you're gonna convert that 3-carbon compound into lactic acid, and remember, that's what makes your muscles burn, and that's an indicator of all diseases, lactic acid buildup. Okay. Okay, so it says in both conditions, the availability of oxygen is limiting the ability to produce oxygen. In both conditions, carbon dioxide concentration in tissue is higher. In one case, because thyroid stimulates its production. In the other, because the Haldane effect limits its loss from the lungs. Okay, so I'm not going to touch on that, but I'll touch on that later. You know, if you have any questions. Could carbon dioxide, a major product of mitochondria, help call mitochondria into existence? So what this is saying is the product of a mitochondria going to produce more mitochondria. That's what it's saying. So it's basically positive feedback. Okay, it said my answer to this is yes, and it will help briefly explain how I see mitochondria. Although I have no hesitancy in accepting that organelles can be exchanged between species, and that it is conceivable that mitochondria might have been. You don't need to know all that. You don't need to know all that. All right, let's see. Yeah, all that stuff about it. Yeah, all that is junk that you really don't need. Okay, in the relative absence of carbon dioxide or excessive alternative solutes absorbents such as lactic acid, the stability of the mitochondrial phase would be decreased, and the mitochondria will be degraded in both structure and function. See, look at that. As the backside of the idea that carbon dioxide stabilizes and activates mitochondria, the idea that lactic acid is involved in the degrading of mitochondria can also be tested experimentally, and it is already supported by a considerable amount of circumstantial evidence. Okay, combination of sensitivity to the environment with a kind of positive feedback or inertia, either upward or downward, corresponds to what we actually see in mitochondrial physiology and pathology. Okay. All right, check this out. Otto Warburg apparently thought of lactate as simply a sign of the respiratory defect that characterizes cancer. It says another scientist at least hinted at its possible role in turning on the catabolic reactions leading to cancer wasting. So catabolism is breakdown. Okay, so when you have too much, you have breakdown and buildup going on in your body at the same time all the time. So if the breakdown exceeds the build up, then you have disease. Okay, so It said, I think a good case can be made for lactate as the cause of the respiratory defect in cancer, just as it is usually the intermediate cause of respiratory derangement of hyperventilation on the organismic level. So that's like when you're fully like, okay, see me, I'm an organism. I was gonna say another word. I'm an organism, right? And if I'm hyperventilating, then that means I have a lot of lactic acid buildup. All right, so it says the presence of lactic acid is so commonly considered to be normal and adaptive response to stress. The shutdown of respiration in the presence of lactic acid is generally considered to be caused by something else, with lactic acid being seen as an effect rather than the cause. Okay, nitric oxide and calcium excess have been identified as the main endogenous anti-respiratory factors in stress. Why is that? Now, what is a tumor? Tumors are usually calcified, right? When you see a tumor that's calcified, when you see calcification, guess what? That's what's going on. Your body is trying to wall something off. Okay. So all this stuff is like the body does not do anything on accident. Everything is meant to keep you alive. You know that's the way God engineered the human machine. Okay. It says nitric oxide and calcium excess has been identified as the main endogenous anti-respiratory factors in stress, though free unsaturated fatty acids are clearly involved too. That's very important. Okay. Unsaturated fatty acids. What is unsaturated fatty acid? Unsaturated fatty acids are basically oil. It's liquid at room temperature. Now, this is why it's important to know history, because 100 years ago, in order to cook, you know, or to fry things, or to saute things, we use animal fat. Animal fat is solid at room temperature. It's saturated. Okay, and back then there weren't all these diseases. Nowadays we use all these oils: canola oil, vegetable oil, sapphire oil, sunflower oil. What's the other one that that Dr. Sebi recommends? I don't remember, but all those are saturated fatty acids. They're toxic, and they're really the cause of many of these diseases. So let's say let's take diabetes, for instance, right? So diabetes is high blood sugar. So why would you have high blood sugar? Well, you would have high blood sugar because you cannot get the sugar from your blood into the cells for energy production, right? So if you cannot get the sugar into the cells, well, why is that? Well, the reason is that unsaturated fatty acids block the receptor. It basically blocks the door of the glucose into the cell. So instead of using sugar for your fuel, you're using fats. So that's why people with diabetes, you know, their breath usually smells like acetone, because you're producing something called acetoacetone, or beta hydroxybutyrate. I think that's the molecule, but either way. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so we've got the respiratory defect. Alright, so glycolysis, the product of glycolysis, lactate and pyruvate have been found to have a casual role in the suppression of respiration. It is both a cause and a consequence of the respiratory shutdown. Though nitric oxide, calcium, and fatty acids are closely involved. Since lactic acid is produced by the breakdown of glucose, A high level of lactic acid in the blood means that a large amount of sugar is being consumed. In response, the body mobilizes free fatty acids as an additional source of energy. An increase of fatty acids suppresses the oxidation of glucose. This is called the Randall effect. It says women with higher estrogen and growth hormone usually have more free fatty acids than men, and during exercise oxidize a higher proportion of fatty acids than men do. This fatty acid exposure decreases glucose tolerance and undoubtedly explains women's higher incidence of diabetes. Okay, while most fatty acids inhibit the oxidation of glucose without immediately inhibiting glycolysis, palmitic acid is unusual, and its inhibition of glycolysis and lactate production without inhibiting oxidation. I assume that this is largely due to its important function of cardiolipin and cytochrome. Okay, you don't even know all that, but that is important though, because palmitic acid is a saturated fatty acid. It's not unsaturated. It's not liquid at room temperature. Exercise, like aging, obesity, and diabetes, increases the levels of free fatty acids and lactate. All right, let me say something right quick. When you're exercising, you need energy, and fat is an energy storage, right? So when you need it, you're gonna tap into it. Fat is kind of like not money in the bank. Money in the bank is like glucose. Fat is like assets you acquire, as you live and whatnot. So let's say I'm working and I buy a nice car. I buy an expensive car, right? And that car is worth like $50,000. Now, when I run out of money at the bank, I'm gonna start stressing out, right? And so that stress kicks in, and guess what I start doing? I start looking around for things that I can sell. I start looking at assets. I'm like, how can I mobilize these assets to make liquid cash or whatnot? So that's kind of like how fat works in the body. Fat is stored energy for a stressful situation. And when you use up all the energy in the bank, which is, your sugar, your glycogen, your body starts looking for fat, for energy. So it's not necessarily, you got to keep things in perspective. In the body, everything operates within a narrow range and whatnot. So, if it's getting out of control, then, that's when it becomes a problem. But, this is saying on a large level that fatty acids will block the body from burning sugar. So, except palmitic acid, saturated fatty acids, okay? So, that's really all I'm gonna read for this. I mean, this gets technical, but, basically, what I want you to take away from this is when you don't have any energy, that's when you get sick. And, you got to understand the reason why you don't have any energy. So remember, when you have a lot of lactic acid and low carbon dioxide, that means you're in a disease state. And remember that lactic acid is indicating pretty much every disease, especially cancer. And remember that cancer is the last stage of cellular metabolic dysfunction. Okay. So, next time you go to the doctor, you'll be able to impress them. But, it probably won't impress them because most doctors don't even operate with this information anyway. And it's crazy because this can really save lives. Anyway, well, I guess I'll go to sleep. So I'll holler at y'all. If you are able to learn anything from this, or if you enjoyed this, or whatever, or you think anybody can benefit from it, share it, like, whatever. Just I'm trying to just get information out because it's kind of like in Paul's prayer in Ephesians. He said, "The eyes of your understanding be enlightened, so that you may know You know, he said that you'll know the hope of his calling, but you know, I just want people's eyes to be enlightened so they will know. You got to know what's going on. If you know what's going on, then you know you can have a little bit more peace about it. Anyway, good night. Holla at y'all.